there's an attitude about pigs that they're disgusting, they're just dirty creatures, and they kind of just want them dead. And I've talked to people that go helicopter hunting, and I go, well, what do you do with all the pigs? And they're like, you leave them there. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, that doesn't seem...
Footage from a Texas hog eradication operation captured something disturbing, and it had nothing to do with the hogs. A routine wildlife removal mission in Blanco County produced infrared trail camera recordings that researchers could not account for after reviewing them. What the cameras had picked up was not a sounder of hogs destroying another field. It was not a failed trap, a botched aerial hunt, or a rancher watching another season's income disappear before sunrise. It was something that had never been documented at this scale anywhere in the country. Something that reframes every dollar spent, every helicopter deployed, and every trap set across the most hog-damaged state in America. Wildlife officials who reviewed this footage did not just note it for the record. They changed the way they were operating. Not because of what the hogs were doing, because of what was happening in the brush surrounding them. Quietly, systematically, completely invisible to every eradication program running across Texas. Here is what was actually on that footage. The invasion. It started in the 1500s. Spanish explorers working their way along the Gulf Coast released domestic pigs into the wilderness as a living food cache for future expeditions. Simple logic: leave pigs, return later, find food. What actually happened was those animals vanished into the forest, spread across the continent, and bred without a single natural check on their numbers. By the time anyone understood what was building, they were everywhere. Then, in the early 1900s, wealthy Europeans began importing Eurasian wild boar into the United States for sport hunting. These were not farm animals. They were lean, aggressive, and forged across centuries of survival in some of the roughest terrain on the European continent. When those boar escaped their enclosures, and they always escaped, they crossed with the feral domestic pigs already roaming free across the South. What emerged from that crossing was something worse than either ancestor. A hybrid, stronger, smarter, more adaptable, and more destructive than anything the continent had ever produced on four legs. And here is the catch. They reproduce at a rate that turns containment into an almost mathematical impossibility. A single sow can produce 2 litters per year, up to 12 piglets each time. Left undisturbed, a feral hog population can double in fewer than 5 months. The USDA now estimates approximately 6.9 million feral hogs across the United States. Texas alone carries roughly 2.6 million, spread across 253 of its 254 counties. The single exception is El Paso County. That is not a wildlife problem. That is an occupation. And the animal itself is built like it knows no one can stop it. Feral hogs sprint at 30 miles per hour. They clear 40-inch fences without slowing. Their tusks exceed 6 inches. Their skin runs over an inch thick, backed by a layer of cartilaginous plate that turns light ammunition into a nuisance. USDA wildlife biologist Dr. Sarah Vance, who has tracked feral hog migration patterns for over a decade, described their behavior during a 2023 field briefing in terms that stopped the room cold. She said, "The moment you miss the vital spot, that hog memorizes your location, your scent, and your method. It does not come back to that spot for a year. You do not hunt these animals. They study you. The damage they leave behind is staggering." At a military airfield in central Texas, a group of hogs rushed the runway at dawn and forced pilots to cancel takeoffs. In Irving, they destroyed residential lawns, tore apart golf courses, and ripped through underground fiber optic infrastructure. In 2019, a woman in Harris County was killed by feral hogs outside her own home. A farmer in Williamson County lost 24 acres of corn in a single night. $40,000 gone before sunrise. Research from Texas A&M and the National Wildlife Research Center found that Texas alone absorbs more than $500 million in feral hog damage every year. Across the entire country, the annual figure has reached an estimated $3 billion. What comes next is something most people working this problem have never said out loud in public. Stay with this, because where it goes changes everything about how this fight was ever supposed to end. The failure. For decades, the official playbook was straightforward. Trap them, shoot them, push them off your land and onto someone else's. None of it worked. Norman, a rancher with over 740 acres in central Texas, watched hogs tear through a grain field he had spent 4 months building. 3 acres gone in one night, fence posts knocked sideways, irrigation lines shredded. He set cage traps loaded with fermented corn. He brought in hunting dog teams. He hired professional removal crews. What he had when the money ran out was a temporary displacement of the problem onto neighboring land. And within days, the hogs were back, more cautious, harder to locate near anything that resembled what they had already learned to avoid. Bruce Leland, a wildlife researcher with over 20 years in the field, had watched this cycle repeat across dozens of properties. He stated it plainly in a published report. Every traditional method is temporary. Catch a few hundred, and the ones that escape produce dozens more piglets before the next season. It is a biological reset button triggered every breeding cycle. Helicopter hunting changed the scale without changing the outcome. A flight team can cover 400,000 acres in days and remove more hogs in a single afternoon than a ground crew manages in a month. But the math never shifted. The hogs breed faster than anyone can pull a trigger. For every herd cleared from a ranch in Kimball County, 2 more pressed in from the brush to the east. The land refilled within a season. And here is what nobody wanted to say out loud. The methods were sometimes making it worse. Aggressive trapping and hunting pressure does not simply reduce hog numbers, it scatters them. Animals that escape a removal operation spread across wider territory, push into counties that were previously clear, and establish entirely new populations. Every helicopter pass that drove a group off one property was essentially seeding the next problem somewhere else. And the harder agencies pushed, the more it cost. A single coordinated helicopter operation over a large Texas ranch can run $20,000 before a single animal hits the ground. USDA Wildlife Services spent over $100 million across the past decade on feral hog control nationwide. And across Texas, the population kept climbing. Nobody had cracked it. Not the government, not the ranchers, not the hunting industry. $3 billion a year in damage, and every solution on the table was temporary at best. But here is what nobody in any of those conference rooms had thought to check. While every agency and every landowner was burning through resources attacking this from the outside, something else was already addressing it in the brush at night. Without a budget, without a field team, without a single press release. And it had been happening in plain sight for years. The revelation. Starting around 2014, field researchers working the Texas Hill Country began finding something they could not explain. Feral hog nests, the shallow brushline beds where sows shelter newborn piglets, were turning up completely excavated and emptied, not raided by hunters, not disturbed by traps, physically dug out and cleared, nothing left but disturbed soil and silence. Dr. Michael Bodenchuk, A wildlife services biologist working the region crouched next to one of these destroyed nests on a cold morning and studied the tracks pressed into the ground. He stayed longer than he had planned. He called his regional director before he even logged the sample, because those tracks were not from bears. They were not from mountain lions. They were small, compact, and evenly spaced. Coyote tracks. A 30-pound coyote should not register as a meaningful threat against a 200-pound feral sow. On paper, that matchup made no biological sense, but the trail cameras were already showing a different story. The first significant infrared footage pulled from Blanco County showed coyotes moving through the brush at 2 o'clock in the morning, not scattered, not scavenging, moving in formation, hunting. The lead animal dropped low, ears barely above the grass, approaching the nest from downwind so the mother hog could not pick up the scent. 2 more coyotes moved into flanking positions on either side. When the sow left the nest for even a few minutes to forage, they struck. And this is the part that made Dr. Vance replay the footage 3 times alone in her office before she fully accepted what she was watching. 1 coyote held position at the nest perimeter. A second tested the scent of the piglets. Then, in a synchronized burst, they rushed. 1 precise bite to the back of the neck. The piglet went limp. It was inside the tree cover before the mother completed her turn. 5 seconds. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. This was not random opportunism. This was coordinated predation, operating at scale, happening right under everyone's noses the entire time. Laboratory results removed whatever doubt remained. Researchers at Fort Hood captured 18 coyotes and submitted them for necropsy. Dr. Justin French, who led the examination team, described the moment the first results came back. The room went silent. Nearly a third of those coyotes had undigested feral hog piglet tissue in their stomachs. Fresh tissue, not pulled from a carcass someone else had left behind. In Georgia, Wildlife Services found piglet DNA in over 30% of coyote scat samples collected statewide. This was systematic, generation-level predation running across multiple states. The hunting machine. The technique has a name among the researchers who study it. High-risk micro-predation. Coyotes never engage adult hogs directly. An adult sow or boar outweighs them 6 to 1 and can gore or trample a coyote in seconds. They know this. Instead, they manufacture chaos. A led coyote sprints past the nest edge, close enough to trigger panic, too fast to catch. Piglets scatter. The sow wheels around, 200 pounds of fury, trying to process which direction to charge. While she is turning, the flanking coyotes lunge from either side, 1 bite to the neck. The piglet goes still. The coyote is back inside tree cover before the mother completes her rotation. By the time she returns to the nest, they are already 300 yards away. Before 2010, there are almost no documented records of coyotes hunting this way. None. But trail cameras across Texas and Georgia are now capturing them operating in coordinated groups of 3 or 4. Designated roles, deliberate positioning. 1 animal draws from the front. 1 circles left. 1 seals the escape route. That is, wolf-level tactical coordination from an animal most people dismiss as a trash scavenger. And it gets stranger. Most coyotes traditionally hunt at night, but specific groups in high hog territories have shifted to early dawn, the exact window when mother hogs are most physically depleted after a full night of foraging. The coyotes identified that fatigue window and exploit it deliberately. They hit when defenses are at their lowest, when reactions are slowest, when nest protection is weakest. Dr. Bodenchuk called it the most sophisticated adaptive behavioral shift he had observed in 20 years of field research. Ecologists believe the pressure that drove it was human-caused. We eliminated so many of the coyote's traditional prey, rabbits, rodents, smaller mammals, that entire populations were forced to innovate. And right beside them, in numbers beyond counting, was the largest surplus prey on the continent. Unguarded piglets. Millions of them, completely overlooked by every predator in the ecosystem. The coyotes did not overlook them. The data is already shifting, and the movement is unmistakable. In Texas, documented piglet losses to coyote predation have doubled over the last decade. In parts of Oklahoma and Georgia, feral hog populations have declined by 20% in areas of sustained coyote activity. No traps deployed, no helicopters in the air, no humans firing a single shot. In East Texas specifically, more than 30% of piglets disappear every breeding season, and nearly every one of those losses lines up geographically with zones of high coyote density. A healthy, undisturbed coyote population is quietly accomplishing what $3 billion in annual human effort could not. And here is the part of this story that hits like a punch to the chest. While this natural correction was taking hold in the brush, the government was paying people to destroy it. From 2017 to 2020, multiple states offered bounties of up to $75 for every coyote brought in dead. Hunters collected those bounties by the thousands. Coyote populations dropped, and in one Texas county, where coyotes were reduced by over 60% through targeted removal, the feral hog population tripled within 3 years. We were eliminating the cure. Let that settle. While ranchers were spending fortunes on traps and helicopter flights that produced temporary results, the one biological force actually hitting hog populations at the source, at the piglet level, at the generational level, was being wiped off the map with state funding. The new war. That realization broke the old playbook in half. Texas has since moved toward a coordinated strategy that for the first time formally includes protecting coyote populations in high-density hog regions. Smart traps now cover the perimeters of working ranches across the state. Units fitted with infrared cameras, solar panels, and wireless phone connections. A rancher can watch a live feed of his entire property from his couch, wait until every animal in a group has entered the pen, and drop the gate with one button press. That detail matters more than it sounds. Feral hogs are intelligent enough that if you trap half a group and leave the other half free, the survivors will never approach a similar structure again. They teach their offspring to avoid it. You get one shot. Some ranchers have learned to leave traps standing wide open for 2 full weeks, corn scattered inside, no trigger active, letting the hogs enter, eat, return, and bring others. Over 14 days, every shred of suspicion dissolves. Then, on a night when cameras show 30 or 40 animals inside at once, the gate closes. In Atascosa County, a coalition of ranchers combining smart traps with coyote-friendly land management watched crop losses fall from 600 acres of destroyed corn annually to nearly 0. The Texas model is now being studied by wildlife agencies in Australia and New Zealand, where invasive feral pig populations are producing their own parallel crisis. But here is what every serious researcher in this field knows, even if they will not say it on camera. No trap replaces what the coyotes do. No helicopter matches their efficiency. No toxin operates 7 nights a week in every weather condition, targeting the exact vulnerability that determines the future of a hog population, which is not the adults. It was never the adults. It is the next generation. Dr. Vance put it plainly in her most recent field report. The coyotes are not a supplement to the strategy. They are the strategy. Everything else is support. What that Blanco County footage actually showed, the footage that sent wildlife officials back to the drawing board, the footage that researchers replayed over and over trying to make sense of what they were seeing, was not a new threat. It was the answer. The answer that had been operating in the Texas brush for years, while every rancher, every agency, and every government program burned through resources looking in the wrong direction entirely. The most effective weapon against the most destructive invasive species in American history was never a bullet. It was never a trap, a helicopter, or a federal bounty program. It was the animal that every one of those programs spent decades trying to eliminate. The coyote, the scavenger everyone underestimated, the predator that adapted quietly, generation by generation, while we were busy paying to wipe it out. If this changed how you think about the balance between predators and the ecosystems we share with them, subscribe now, because what we uncover next goes even deeper into the stories hiding inside the footage nobody expected to find.